Hey everyone, I decided to cover Sir Ector for today's skill breakdown. Sir Ector is the first Arcanist you get in the game, belonging to the Christian Tyrant morality. I've seen a number of players sort of split on him. Some usually kick him pretty quickly, some keep him around for a long time. In my personal opinion, he's actually pretty good. He's a strong, decent Arcanist to help you through Act 1, because most other Arcanists you get in the game aren't coming for a good bit longer. And he's completely serviceable, in my opinion, until then, and definitely won't feel like he's holding back your party. Before I get into the skills, there's just one suggestion I wanted to make to everyone. Even if you aren't necessarily a big fan of Sir Ector, don't think you'll be using him in combat, he does have this Artificer trait, which will generate tons of free relic dust for you, so you may want to consider just keeping him around in the training ground, and then put him in the tower to generate this dust, and just let him do that. Enough of that, let's go into the skills. Beginning with Tier 1, as always, there's nothing really fancy, nothing new. Ector is very much sort of the base template for other Arcanists to mirror off of. We have his normal attack. This is Force Bolt. Many of the other Arcanists have some sort of twist on this. His is the basic one. It provides knockback. While maybe not the strongest condition effect out of them, this can still be very useful for forcing repositioning onto enemies to put them in line with another enemy or two, so you can then land a better AoE. Additionally, I find early on in the game, this is especially useful with the slowing hex we're coming up to helping slow down enemies and delay them longer and longer and keep them from reaching your party and just getting some free damage until your melee can engage with them. With the upgrades, Piercing Bolt gains 10% armor break. Damned Prey, it deals 20% extra damage against hexed units. Mind Game, the hero gains 1 AP when killing an enemy with Force Bolt. And multiple targets, Force Bolt becomes 3 bolts for reduced damage on each one. Damned Prey is very good. That extra 20%, you're going to be hexing all of your targets anyways, definitely a must take. And if you are continuing to use him into the late game, triple target isn't bad. If your team comp has a lot of AoEs, this can be useful for just repositioning multiple enemies to better line up AoEs with your other targets, or even maybe on him, as he does have a couple AoEs later in the skill tree. Second is Blood Hex, applies bleeding, 30% damage debuff to enemies. Hemophilia, lower the physical debuff resist. Short Syllables, reduce the cooldown by 1. Bad Blood, increase the duration by 1. And Black Blood, increase the hex intensity by 50%. These three are usually always must-takes for me. This one is useful, but maybe a bit more niche. If there's something else you want to take, this one you can maybe reassign, but lowering physical debuff can be useful. Making it more effective, this is a much stronger earlier game one, because that's increasing that damage debuff. On higher difficulties, this can literally be a lifesaver. Next we have Slowing Hex, I think one of the best hexes in this game. The slowed target means AP is going to cost 100% more and can get even higher with hex intensity. Early on in the game, this is going to be one of your best friends, because keeping those heavy hitting bruisers away from your party with this move will save you a lot of damage. The first upgrade you're going to want to take is Witchcraft, which reduces the cost by 1. Vulnerability grants it a 10% vulnerability debuff. This one's a bit more situational. Fatigue, increase the duration by 1. This will be very useful at different stages of the game. Having them slowed longer in the early game is very useful, while in the later game, being able to apply this to multiple targets with your cycling. The last ability here, Mass Hex, turns it into that 3x3 AoE, but now the hex intensity is reduced by 40%. I'm still a very strong proponent of keeping it the single target. I like picking a priority target, locking them down, and keeping them from doing anything. With that 40% reduction, I feel like it's not enough. Maybe later in the game, when you compensate through hex intensity upgrades, this could be worth it. I prefer the single target. Magical Armor, a great defensive for all Arcanists. You definitely want to make sure you get this. They grant a huge amount of armor, 29 at max level, for the first attack. The first upgrade, Reinforced Armor, this gives it a huge boost to how much armor, plus 12 in this case. So it really helps make sure none of that damage from that first hit bleeds over into your HP. Resist Injury grants an injury token. If your Sir Ector is struggling earlier on, or at any point in the game really, and is constantly taking injuries, you may want to consider this, but usually by the late game, you're much better at avoiding injuries. I would swap this back out. Extended armor, it now lasts 2 attacks, which is a big difference. 2 attacks per encounter on your Arcanist. A lot of the time, that's all you need. And then finally, enchanted armor, increase armor by 5. This is his base armor. This still obviously would stack with magical armor. It's a pretty strong pick, just to help mitigate those first couple incoming attacks. Then the 3 basic passives, extra damage for 10% more weapon damage, long reach for +1 to range, and +1 spellcraft. This one is very useful. And then Master Alchemist for stronger potions. If you really like potions or you think you need it, I guess go for it. I find this to be one of the least impactful of the Arcanist skills, though. Going into Tier 2, we have his first somewhat unique ability. I believe there's one other Arcanist that shares this one, and that is Fire Blast. This is going to be really the first real AoE you're going to get access to in the game, and it's quite useful. 3x3, 70% weapon damage, with some very solid upgrades on it. Earth Scorcher. The ground is now ignited for 2 turns, so there's just going to be a patch of fire. Units that start their turn in there or move into there take an extra 20% weapon damage. Putting this on groups of enemies, especially if they're already close up next to your front line, they'll just continue to stand in it to keep hitting you, and this is just free damage. Firestarter, the AoE now causes burning, just even more extra passive damage beyond the initial hit. This is very great. Conflagration, reduce the AP cost by 1. We always want that. And then Searing Impact. The very center target takes 50% extra weapon damage. This is nice, but not something super crucial to this ability. If you want something else later on, you can move this one. Death Hex, one of the strongest hexes, as it's just a flat cut to target vitality. It does last 1 turn, so it's intended to create sort of a burst window for you. You delete some vitality on a target, and then everyone else focuses them to finish them off, if they otherwise normally would have been a higher health target and therefore more difficult to bring down. Has some solid upgrades as well. Horrid Visions, reduce the target's mental debuff resist by 10%. This is useful if you think they may survive past it, or you want to put some sort of CCs on them instead of trying to kill them. The main focus of this ability, though, is to try and kill them, so this may not be the best pick, but it's decent. Dread, however, very good. Apply 20% vulnerability debuff. Just make it that much easier to follow up this move with other attacks to kill them. Oblivion, reduce the cooldown by 1. Being able to use this more often and cycle it easier is very strong. And then with Incantation, it's a 40% hex intensity buff to it, making this amount of HP you're deleting even stronger. Next up is a great passive, Master of Hexes, 25% hex intensity, making your 3 hexes that much stronger. They're very powerful skills, so this is very good. With the upgrade, Ancestral Hex, plus 10%, so now it's 35%. Corrupt Armor, enemies you hex have their armor reduced by 4. If your party's struggling with armor breaking, this is not a bad pick. Quick Casting, AP cost of hexes reduced by 1. This is very good. Cheaper spells all around. Combos very well. Strong synergy with the rest of their kit, especially once you get to Tier 3. Once you pick this one up, you can actually respec this point out of slow, as this has a base cost of 2. So either of these bring it down to 1. And as you can see, do not bring it down to 0. Lastly, Power of Hexes. The hero's weapon damage is increased by 5% for each active hex. This is a good upgrade, and definitely something, for example, I may respec that skill point for AP cost reduction on slowing hex, move it down into here, but it is not a super high priority for me. There's just other abilities I would rather pick first. One such ability is this next passive, Potent Hex, 20% hex intensity and +1 spellcraft. Hex intensity is a huge thing, and you always want to be trying to grab as much of this as possible. Then lastly, Terror Wings, gain 1 movement AP at the beginning of your turn for every active hex. This can theoretically become a decent amount of movement AP, but I generally don't need to move my Arcanist very much, so I don't bother picking this one. Kicking off Tier 3, I believe this skill actually is completely unique to him. I don't recall other characters sharing this move. It is Wall of Flame. You create a 4-tile long wall. It will last for 2 turns. Units within it, when you cast it, take 50% weapon damage, and then they will take an additional 20% if they start their turn in there, or if they try to move through it. This isn't a super high damaging move, but it is a decent chip damage maneuver. You put it in a space you know enemies are going to be running through, or maybe they're already lined up against your melee, so they're not moving anywhere, and you just cast it on them, and then it's just more of that persistent continuing damage. comboing that with Fire Blast, you just have a lot of passive ticking damage on them. It does have some good upgrades, though, to place it more defensively and try and catch them as they go through certain bottlenecks. In the first upgrade, it applies Burning. This is just good passive damage. Cauterize increases the duration by 1. Firestorm increase the length of the wall by 2. Any wall move, you're always going to want to increase this length. And then Dark Flames. Moving in the Wall of Flames area costs double AP. It's effectively like a slow hex along the duration of the wall, so it just really helps hamper them as they're trying to run to you. This is what I was meaning when I mentioned it using as a more defensive tool. Place this far enough up, just takes out a nice little chunk of AP as they run through it, and all of a sudden maybe they can't reach you, therefore making your party safer. All at the same time, they are now afflicted with burning, taking some damage along the way. It's just a nice, hampering tool, doing some good chip damage. We have a great passive, Master of Fire, 10% more weapon damage for all fire skills. You can see his primary offensive maneuvers are 2 fire skills, and the upgrades on this are amazing. Engulfed in Flame, 30% weapon damage for burning effects, making all burning effects fairly substantial. Firepower, plus 1 turns for burning duration, also great. Burning longer equals more damage. If you manage to get that Summer Staff rune I showed off in my Merlin build, this combo's great. If you don't pick Merlin, it works fine on Ector as well. Inferno, plus 10% weapon damage for each unit affected by burning. Very easy to apply a lot of burning, so this is a lot of weapon damage, which then obviously will then stack with, Wall of Flames ticking damage if they're still sitting in it, and also Earth Scorcher. So you apply burn, and then this stacks with Inferno, and now the persistent damage from both these skills is now immediately elevated. And Wildfire, extra cooldown reduction, reduce the cooldown of fire skills by 1 once per turn when you get a kill, just helping you cycle these offensive abilities that much quicker. We have Spell Resistance. I pretty much never really take these, just because I like to focus more on the damage and the debuffing capability, not really the defensive side of an Arcanist. But 25% less damage from incoming spells is nothing to sneeze at. That can be fairly significant. Upgrades with Flameborn, immunity to burning. This is not a common status effect enemies are going to be putting on your units, so this is very niche if you do choose to take this talent. Protection, an additional 10% damage reduction to incoming spells. Mental Fort, 15% mental debuff resist. I am a big fan of debuff resistances, so this is definitely one I would take if I was taking this talent. And then Ancient Ward, fully negate the first incoming spell, also a strong one, especially if your Arcanist isn't able to move out of an AoE, or you're just choosing not to move them out of the AoE. Then lastly, as always, we have Spell Power, just extra range, very useful, and extra damage, and a Spellcraft. This is just a great triple threat talent, provides 3 things that are all great for your Arcanist. Then we have Mindstorm, which is just sort of the great enabler for all Arcanists. 3 skills are on cooldown, you cast a 4th, it reduces the cooldown of all current abilities by 1. With all these cheap skills through hexes and fire blasts and what have you, you're just really going to be churning through a lot of your abilities, laying down tons of fire. And with the persistent flame effects from Fire Blast and its Scorched Earth and then Wall of Flame, you'll have huge patches of fire all over the map, which can really mess with the AI, trying to find paths around it, or eventually they may just say, screw it, run through it, and boom, burning is spreading around like crazy, and all of a sudden all of your enemies are on fire. And then lastly, of course, is Strong-Willed for 30% mental debuff resist. So there you have it, Sir Ector and his skill tree. A lot of players really don't keep him around for combat use, at least, once they get later into the game, because they just get access to some better Arcanists. Unless you're going a Christian Tyrant run, in which case he's going to be your best friend and really your only true option for Arcanist going later into the game. This really shouldn't be seen as such a bad thing, in my opinion. I do think he can get a bit of a bad rap. I think he's very solid, and I don't think you'll really have much complaints in terms of how effective he is in combat, just really comparing him to other Arcanists. On his own, though, in a vacuum, really good. And if you manage to get the Summer Staff on your Christian Tyrant run and give it to him, he can make great use out of it. Similar to Merlin with lots of these AoEs and line spells with his fire attacks, except they're cheaper, so you'll be able to spread them around more and maybe even trigger the effect much more easily or consistently on Ector. Just, some food for thought. Anyways, I hope this video was useful, maybe opened up some eyes about Ector. Maybe not, but either way, thank you for watching.